Hi, everybody. Professor H here. We are continuing our lecture series for developmental psychology. Today, we are looking at Chapter 2, Part 3 in our book, Pregnancy Problems. I hope everybody's doing okay with all the fires going around. We still have a lot of smoke in our area, and I just hope everybody is safe and sound. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and do our screen share. And here we go. Okay, I'm not getting a whole lot better at this, but I'm going to keep trying. One of these days I'll get it right. Probably right about the end of the semester, I'll be figuring this out. Okay, so what we're going to go ahead and do is just go through our PowerPoint like usual. And you guys remember that this PowerPoint will also be available on Canvas. So you can print out the slides if you want to make notes on. Okay, Chapter 2, Part 3, Pregnancy Problems. Specifically, we're going to be taking a look at prenatal problems and infertility. The first pregnancy problem we're going to be talking about is chromosomal disorders. Chromosomal disorders can occur because of an issue during meiosis. Remember, meiosis is the process where our gametes are being formed. That would be our sperm and our egg, which are being formed into the cells that will each carry 23 chromosomes. One of the big issues that can occur there is that these gametes may be carrying too few or too many chromosomes. So that zygote, when the zygote is formed, you do not have the correct number of chromosomes. Remember, once that joining occurs, you're supposed to have 46 chromosomes. And if that number is incorrect, it can lead to a number of problems or even a problem with viability, meaning that that zygote may not continue to grow and develop. However, if the zygote does grow and develop, that organism will eventually have some issues. What we're going to look at here and that our book covers are two main types of chromosomal disorders. The first one we're going to look at are sex chromosomes disorders, and the second one we're going to take a look at is Down's syndrome. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, one of the problems that we can see with chromosomal disorders is that we will have the wrong number of chromosomes. When we're talking about the sex chromosome disorders, we are talking about an extra X or an extra Y. Or sometimes just one X instead of that second X. So, for example, it would be a male that would normally be an X and a Y. They may have XXY or XYY, or a female might just have one X and not the second X. Common consequences include common cognitive deficits, so you might have cognitive problems and abnormalities in the reproductive system. Some of these problems could be, for example, that when the child is developing and hits puberty, their sexual organs do not develop properly, and sometimes those things can be treated with hormone treatments to help correct for that. Oh, I'm going to go back a slide. Sorry about that. I had a couple things written on my notes. Basically, it looks like 1 in 500 infants have some correct sex chromosome disorder. And those correct sex chromosome disorders often lead to, like I said, cognitive problems or reproductive issues for the developing person. Down syndrome is another chromosomal disorder. There is an extra chromosome on the 21st pair. So that particular pair has an extra chromosome with it. That particular chromosomal disorder has a specific set of things that we see with it. For example, there are certain physical characteristics like the wide face, a issue with an extra flap on their eyelids. There are cognitive problems. Social development can vary. People with Down syndrome, sometimes they have very outgoing, happy personalities. Others are very withdrawn. It's not just one specific type of personality that we see or social development pattern that we see with Down syndrome. Some of the specific physical traits that we see with this particular disorder: a short, stocky build, flat face, large tongue, extra fold on the eyelids, and cognitive deficits. In addition, there are often hearing and heart deficits as well. The other interesting thing about this disorder is people suffering with this disorder have a lower life expectancy. By the time they are 30 or 40 years old, they are already experiencing the diseases that we see in old age. For example, Alzheimer's, dementias, severe arthritis, things like that, heart problems. People with Down syndrome start experiencing these very early on, and their life expectancy is significantly lower. Some of the reasons for these chromosomal disorders to occur are parental age. We know that there is a correlation between parental age and chromosomal disorders. And that relationship is that as the people get older, when you are, say, over 40, we start seeing more chromosomal disorders, especially if a woman is over 40. These types of disorders are not like hemophilia or sickle cell, where somebody is carrying a particular gene to express this. This just happens to be a problem that occurs during that meiosis process. And the reason for that problem, oftentimes we believe, is due to age. A woman's eggs, as you know from earlier lecture, she already has all the eggs that she will have in her lifetime when she is in utero. When she is still in her mother's womb, she's already got all the eggs she's ever going to have. The final stages of meiosis don't occur until that woman is an adult. And during those final processes, when those eggs, say you're over 40 and those eggs are starting to finish up that meiosis process, at that time, those eggs have kind of been stored for a long time. And oftentimes things just don't translate over the way that they're supposed to during that process. We think that there might be a connection or a relationship between the father's age and chromosomal disorders, but we do not have a clear connection. We know with the female that age, especially over 40, leads to an increased incidence of chromosomal disorders. Here is a graph that is showing Down syndrome and maternal age. So the incidence of Down syndrome are low during this age range here, under 35. At 35, it starts to slope upward. And then over 40, you can see a very steep increase in the incidence of Down syndrome occurring. And we already talked about why this rises so steeply after the age of 40. There are different ways that parents can go about finding out if their developing fetus has one of these situations going on, has a chromosomal disorder going on. This is kind of nerve-wracking, actually, just talking to the screen. I really wish there was people here to talk to. It makes me nervous when I'm just talking to the screen, but I'll do my best. Okay. So we're going to mention these few techniques right here. The ultrasound uses high-frequency sound waves. Maternal blood screening, it is not diagnostic, but it can tell you certain things that they see in the blood. Amniocentesis and chronic villus sampling. So the first and most common one is ultrasound. Here in a developed country like the United States, using an ultrasound during pregnancy is a very common thing. Depending on what insurance you have, you may be able to have multiple ultrasounds throughout your pregnancy and see this organism developing and growing at different stages. And if you have worse insurance, you may just get an ultrasound at a couple of different times and that's it, or maybe even just one. In developing countries, oftentimes people have no access to things like ultrasounds. The ultrasound is non-invasive. They simply put a gel on the abdomen and the sound waves are projected into the belly and bounce off of the structures within. giving us an image of the developing organism. The maternal blood screening, basically they take a look at proteins, hormones, and things like that that are going on in the mother's blood. Back to the ultrasound, there's the 3D ultrasounding and there's what's called 4D. The 3D ultrasounding gives you a very good image, like a picture of the organism that's developing. The 4D gives you kind of a live streaming of what's going on in there. You can actually watch with 4D ultrasound. You can watch the developing fetus move, suck its thumb, roll around, turn around, things like that that you can actually see in real time with a 4D. You also can, at a certain point in development, you'll be able to take a look with an ultrasound and see if the baby is positioned in such a way that you can check the genitals to see what sex the child is going to be. It is cheap, it is easy, it is safe. Amniocentesis is a little bit more risky. Women over 40 oftentimes will get an amniocentesis. This is it will give you some fluid sample out of the amniotic sac that the baby is in. So what they will do is they will use an ultrasound to guide the needle in. They go in through the abdomen and they they put that needle in to that amniotic sac and draw out some fluid, and that fluid is going to have the genetic material from the baby. Or from the fetus, I'm sorry. When you draw that out and look at that genetic material, at that point, they will also be able to determine if there is a genetic abnormality going on with the developing fetus. This is done 15 to 20 weeks. There is some risk of spontaneous abortion, meaning that there is a risk of the mom aborting that fetus due to that procedure. The risk is relatively low, but there is a risk. The next one is called chronic villus sampling. It utilizes cells from the forming umbilical cord at 5 to 10 weeks of development. Usually this is done for the same reason that amniocentesis. Basically, you're concerned about some sort of genetic situation going on and you want to take a look and see what's going on with this developing fetus. They would go in with they would go in through the vagina and through the cervix and get cells from the forming umbilical cord, and the same thing, they would be able to look at the genetic material and evaluate that. And once again, this has the same type of risk as the amniocentesis. So we have the same type of risk involved, where there could be spontaneous abortion using that, slight risk of miscarriage there. All right, if they are both amniocentesis and chronic villus sampling are very accurate in finding genetic disorders. Amniocentesis is about 100%, like almost 100% accurate, and then the CVS, chronic villus sampling, is what they're saying is about 99%. So these are very accurate tests that you can get. Genetic counseling is something that people often consider when they have some type of disorder that they feel may be heritable, may be something they can pass on to their offspring. For example, people with sickle cell, hemophilia, and various other disorders, or if they suspect that they may be a carrier for a disorder, sometimes they want to go ahead and get screened for things. Or if you know you have a particular type of genetic disorder, you may want to go ahead and have a screening done. And then you and your partner, or you, depending on if you have a partner, or if you're, whatever, you can go ahead and make an educated decision about what you want to do. And once again, some of the reasons for that are inherited genetic conditions. If you have couples with a history of miscarriage or infertility, they may want to see a genetic counselor to find out, why is this? Why are we having all of these miscarriages and what's going on? Or older couples, women over 35, men over 40. And those are for the reasons that we mentioned earlier. As the man ages, his sperm has more problems with motility, meaning they're not going to swim as well, they're not going to be as strong of a swimmer, and there will be fewer of them. And with the female, some of the eggs may not be going through that meiosis process as well. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about infertility. Infertility is an inability to attain pregnancy after at least a year of regular sexual intercourse. Basically, if you've only been trying for 6 months, you've been off the pill for 6 months, you've been, guys have been trying to have a baby, you're not going to be considered as having an issue with infertility unless it's been over a year of trying and you still are not able to get pregnant. US rates consistent over the past century, about 10 to 15%. And basically, I think they have some other, okay. There are social consequences in larger collectivist cultures. In the individualistic Western society, oftentimes there's some marital strain, sometimes there's some sense of loss and sorrow that goes with this, some frustration, some distress, things like that. However, in some of the collectivist cultures and more traditional cultures, lack of being able to conceive a child is a very more stigmatized type of thing. People are, especially the women, are usually blamed regardless of if it's the woman or the man, and it's about a 50-50 shot on whether it's the man or the woman that is causing that is more responsible for the infertility. It could be either person. Women are normally blamed and their status is often lowered. Daughter is not as good as a son, so if somebody's only conceiving daughters, that can be problematic because to carry on the line in a lot of societies, you need to be able to have a son. Also, in some cultures, a husband can actually divorce the wife for this and ask for repayment. Sometimes there's a bride price, which are actually kind of illegal now, but and we'll go into that later on when we talk about marriage and stuff. We'll talk about bride price and all of that. But basically, they're going to ask for kind of a repayment for whatever they've invested in this woman when they return her to her family. So that's kind of a big deal. Causes and treatments of infertility. For men, there are 3 main causes: too few of sperm, quality of the sperm is poor, and low motility. So motility, once again, is the swimming. So if they don't swim, if they swim crooked like this, they're not going to be able to get up and make that turn, get up the fallopian tube, all that, all that stuff. They'll just kind of be stuck in the uterus and not be able to get up there and fertilize the egg. The quality of the sperm is poor. Maybe we have sperm that is not quite, it's just not very strong, just like weak sperm. And then low motility, too few. And we already addressed that when we talked about how men are affected with age. For women, there are many causes. Ovulation problems are the most common, where a woman is not ovulating properly. And a woman's fertility naturally drops over the age of 40, and oftentimes women start menopause during that time where they are no longer able to reproduce. And we will talk about that in a later chapter as well. We do know that for men and for women, some of the problems that may also occur is smoking, alcohol, and drugs all affect your fertility. So those things are things that will affect your ability to become pregnant. Fertility and maternal age, once again, as we have noted a couple of times so far, as you get older, your ability to become pregnant is decreased. So with a woman's age, her prime time for pregnancy is up here in her 20s. And then it slowly decreases over age. And we talked about the quality of the eggs and such that's involved there. The ability to ovulate, all of those things decrease over time. And then usually by the time a woman is in their 50s, they are in menopause, or, you know, at least entering that process. And that's the process where they will no longer be fertile. Causes and treatments. There are a lot of different technologies that have been developed in order to help people get pregnant. Intrauterine insemination is the simplest and least expensive. So basically what that is the woman at the appropriate time, they keep an eye on her, say, okay, she's gonna ovulate, she ovulates. So during that 24-hour window when it is most likely that the woman can become pregnant, she is artificially inseminated. In other words, a tube with sperm is put up there so that that sperm can easily get through the uterus and up into her fallopian tubes. So it's giving it a bit of a head start. So that's one way to do it. And this artificial insemination works well for same-sex couples, if you're females, you know, or if you have other types of issues. Fertility drugs are another way that infertility can be treated. They can mimic hormones that provoke ovulation. One of the things about the fertility drugs is that oftentimes those fertility drugs are causing you to have follicles to ovulate, and oftentimes more than one follicle will develop, and then those follicles will ovulate at the same time, producing multiple pregnancies. And during that time, say you do a fertility drug and they say, oh my gosh, we have 5 zygotes now, 5 of these zygotes now that are forming. And then they have to decide, well, what are we going to do about this? Maybe 2 of them look really puny. They might want to kind of get rid of those and leave the other 3. There's a lot of decisions that have to go into using fertility drugs. Let's see. The fertility drugs have a 22 to 35% success rate. However, there is a high risk for blood clots, kidney damage, damage to the ovaries, and 10 to 25% that use fertility drugs have multiple births. And there is also an increased risk of miscarriage, premature birth, and developmental difficulties with those children. All right, and the last one is in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization is basically, you've heard of like the Petri dish baby, right? So the woman has her ova extracted and they are fertilized with the man's sperm, basically in a Petri dish, and then that zygote is formed. And when that zygote gets up to a certain point, and I don't think I wrote the, let's see, nope, I don't have the details of all of that. Yeah, I don't have the details on how old the zygote is or how many days before they implant. But when they look pretty good, they will implant 2 or 3 of the zygotes into the woman's uterus. And then they'll take a look, and basically the most viable looking zygotes will be kept and the rest will be terminated. And that just, once again, these are, usually it's 2 to 3 that they place, sometimes 4. And that's why oftentimes we'll see, like with these types of treatments, you might see multiple births. All right. Multiple challenges. Okay, multiple births often receive extensive media attention, but the consequences of such births are often tragic, with higher risk of miscarriage, premature birth, and serious developmental difficulties. If you look at these little infants here, you can see we have one beefy one, 2 of them that look kind of beefy. This one's a little bit scrawnier, and then this little guy, he's tiny. He's a tiny little guy, or a girl. And so with multiple births, you oftentimes have a lot of different problems because you still have only one uterus that you're developing in. There's not a lot of room in there for all of them. So oftentimes they're born prematurely and often underweight, which cause a whole nother plethora of difficulties that we're going to talk about next chapter. All right, that's it for this one. It's hopefully kind of short, I hope. Try to kind of power through it. We have some appendices that are going to talk about the different slides that can give you the links to the data and stuff. So if you have questions, please go ahead and shoot me an email. And this is pretty much all we're going to do on this chapter. And that will be it. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this screen here. I'm still working on this, guys. I just don't have it yet. All right, let's see if I can make this bigger now. I'm going to do a screen share, get us back to the main screen. Okay. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for your patience ahead of time. And you guys have a good day. What a nightmare.